Hello, survivors. This is your girl, Abby Ayola Williams, and you're now listening to How to Survive Society. How to Survive Society is a weekly podcast that features survivors. These are people that have been through the ringers in life. They've been through hell and back, but they choose to stay positive. They choose to win. They choose to thrive, and they choose to survive. So let's get right into it. Hello, survivors. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of How to Survive Society. Today, I have a very special guest. Her name is Martina Clark. She was diagnosed with HIV at the age of 28 years old, and now she's 58, living and thriving, and living with HIV, but she found a way to survive the disease. So we're gonna talk more about that and go from there. So Martina, please introduce yourself and thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, Abby. I currently live in Brooklyn, and I am living with HIV for more than 31 years and aging with HIV. And those are sentences, all of them, that I never thought I would say in my entire life.
Wow, that's amazing. So you got diagnosed, you were 28 years old in 92. This is when you first found out that you had HIV. So
Exactly.
how did you catch the HIV? Did you know how you caught it, or?
I have to assume that it was through unprotected sex, which is how most people in the world get HIV. I don't know 100%. I will never know 100%. But I know that I wasn't at risk through any of the other factors. So that is the most likely scenario. And I was 28 years old, and I felt like my life was supposed to be just beginning. I was ready to go out and have a career and a life and hopefully a family. And then I tested positive, and my world just sort of shut down, and I felt like everything had been erased.
I can empathize because my birth mother,
Mm-hmm.
she actually died of AIDS. She's had the disease for over 18 years,
Wow. I'm so
but she
sorry to
never.
hear that.
Yeah, thank you. She didn't tell anyone that she had HIV.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't know until after she died. That's when I found out that it was AIDS that killed her. But
Wow.
then I started blaming myself because I live here in Canada and she lived in Nigeria. So I
Yeah.
I was thinking.
I lost you there for a second. Are you
Tell
back?
me, or I don't know, like it's always a question that I play over my head every time, like how come you didn't tell me? Because I'm sure I could have helped in some way, if I had known that she had that. But yeah, so she died in 2018 at the age of 52, turning 53.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's that.
Wow. I'm so sorry to hear that. And I think that sadly that is the case for so many people, and particularly women, that they die with the shame of having AIDS, but never reaching out to tell people who could support them. That is sadly a far too common story.
Hmm.
And I think that is on society. Science has done so much work to design medicines that will actually keep us alive a lot longer. But unless society supports people and says it's okay if you have HIV, it's okay. It's a disease, and disease doesn't choose people specifically. It is a virus. It doesn't care.
Yes.
Then I think we would do a lot better in society. But even today, I know people who, have had the disease for a long time and are still afraid to tell people, and it breaks my heart. It just crushes my soul to know that so many people still live with that fear.
Yes, exactly. And for you, what gave you the courage to be like, I have this disease and I don't care who knows about it. I'm still going to live my life and do what I need to do. Like, what gave you that courage?
I think what gave me that courage is in large part that in 1992, when I was tested, we didn't have treatment yet. And
Mm-hmm.
so my doctor said, you probably have a good 5 years to live and just try not to be stressed and relax and take care of yourself. And I was like, oh, right, sure, my life is over. What are you talking about? But because I didn't have a sense that there was any option to get better, and
Mm-hmm.
I really was living on this premise that I was going to be dead in a few years, I think that's what gave me the courage to speak out, because I thought I truly, truly, truly had nothing else to lose. I also had never seen another woman with HIV. I
Mm-hmm.
probably had, but in my mind, I perceived I had not, right? I'd only known lots of gay men with HIV because I lived in San Francisco at the time, and it was sadly very, very present in San Francisco, but only among gay men that I knew of. So when I
Mm-hmm.
tested positive, I felt like, wow, I'm the only woman on the planet. Of course, I wasn't, but that was how I felt. And so the combination of feeling like I'm the only one, um, and I only have a couple of years to live, I'm going to die of this thing, there's no getting better. Uh, I think the combination of those things and the anger that this happened to me at such a young age, I thought I have to do something so that even if I can't reverse it for myself, maybe somebody
Mm-hmm.
else can benefit from my experience.
Wow. That's
And
that's a good
that's,
way. Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, it gave me courage. And I think it's what kept me alive all these years, to be honest. That and just luck, good luck. I can't claim anything else except that, and having the opportunity to start treatment when I needed it, which not everybody has, of course. But all of those things are what kept me together. But I think the fighting back and the standing up and realizing through my own activism that I very much was not alone, and that sadly there were so many women like your birth mom who
Mm-hmm.
didn't feel safe to come out and talk about it. um, I realized that there was really, really a need for somebody to stand up and yell and say, what are you doing? And why are you ignoring all of these people? And I was in a position where I could be an activist and support myself through other jobs. I didn't have a family at the time to worry about. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
had, my siblings and parents, but I didn't have any children or husband or any of that. So I
Yeah.
wasn't worried about my activism ruining somebody else's life,
Mm.
um, which also makes a big difference. I think that's a big thing. And I think now it's actually harder in some ways for people to be activists because they have more to lose, because you
Yes.
can live a longer life with HIV. The medications work. There's so many things that we didn't have then. But at that time, I really thought I have nothing else to lose. I'm going to be
Mm.
dead in a couple of years. Why not? And and it ultimately, kind of by accident, but it ultimately led me on a path that was absolutely extraordinary. And I would much rather have had a life without HIV, but I also had some great experiences that I wouldn't trade for anything.
Mm.
So um, for me, it was the right thing to do. And I met so many extraordinary people around the world living with HIV and supporting people with HIV. And I feel so blessed to be a part of that community around the world.
Wow. That's courageous. it's it's like when you feel like you have nothing to lose, you do your best work because you don't have anything talking you out of it or anyone telling you, oh no, you can't do this. You just focus and do what you have to do.
Exactly.
That's a great, yeah, that's a great way to see it, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. It certainly worked for me. And I also have complete respect for people who are like, yep, I'm not going to do that. Because once you put that information out there, you can never get it back. That's
Mm.
one thing that's really important to people to know before they become activists and be the face of something, is you can't change that. Once you're out there, you're out there. But
It's true.
and I as I said, I really respect people who are like, I can't do it personally because I have too many other factors that won't make it comfortable for me.
Yeah.
But I think that for those of us who can, there's so much work still to be done. And even for those who can't be in the public eye, there's always still small things that we can do to support people living with HIV. And again, particularly women with HIV, because even in 2023, women are still so invisible in this pandemic. It's crazy.
I know.
Yeah,
And they usually get it from sexual activities, like you said.
exactly. I
And
think
it's not
something
their
like,
fault.
exactly. So it's like 90% of the people in the world get HIV through unprotected sex.
Mm.
And more than half of the cases of HIV in the world are women. And
Yeah.
I think those are two facts that most people don't know. They are
Mm.
just not aware. At least in North America, it is my perception that people still think this is a gay man's disease. And it
Yeah.
still very much is, but it is not exclusively a gay man's disease. Um, and I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but we also need to be more inclusive and realize that it impacts any person with a body that comes in contact with the virus. It has nothing to
Mm.
do with what you look like or what you
Where you're
do in your
from.
life. Yeah, or where
Yeah.
you're from. Exactly. Yeah.
Mm. Wow. So are you still an HIV educator for United Nations, or that was just something you did for a period of time?
That was something I did for a period of time, but a very long period of time. I started with UNAIDS in the mid 90s, and my last position with the United Nations was in 2017. I guess I left. I was working as a HIV advisor for the Department of Peacekeeping Operations. And in between, I worked for almost a decade for UNICEF. So nearly 20 years, I worked with the United Nations system. I have since left that, and I now am a teacher. I teach English 101 to high school kids taking college classes early. So officially, they're nowhere in my job title am I an HIV educator, but I am still an
Mm-hmm.
educator. And what I teach my kids is hopefully, my goal at least, is for them to find their voice on the page through writing, so that even though officially we're there to learn the constraints of academic writing and the basic different forms of essays in a research paper, for me what really matters is that they learn how to express what they really want to say, not just what they think the teacher wants to hear, but that they learn within those parameters to get their own opinions across in an effective and eloquent manner. And so in that way, I feel like I'm still sort of a social justice educator, if you will, not specifically on HIV, but for all of the many, many, many issues that this generation of people are facing, which
Yes.
are sadly so many.
A lot. I know.
Too many.
I I always feel so bad for them. Just like, how are you going to survive the next 10, 15, 20 years
I
with
know.
all these things happening in the world? Like the morals. I don't even know where to start. Like so many things happening. I'm just like, man, I feel bad for this new generation. Like
Yeah,
all they have is TikTok, you know?
exactly. Exactly. And so for me, I feel like what I can contribute for them is to share maybe not my personal experiences as much, because if it came up in class, I would not hesitate to share. But I also feel like that is not the job of an English teacher to come in and talk about the fact she has HIV, right? My job is to teach you how to write a paper. But at the same time, to share all of the sort of experiences that I have had, and the tools that I am now equipped with that led me to being a successful advocate and activist and UN personnel and all of that, to share those tools with them so that they can go forward in the world armed a little bit more broadly, I guess. And I have to say, they give me hope for the world. They are amazing. They're deeply concerned about a lot of issues, and I feel for them, but I also feel like they have a lot of fire.
Yes.
And they are determined that things are not going to continue the way they have been, which I think is good. I mean, it's sort of,
we need a change.
We need a change. Metaphorically, we need to burn it all down and start over.
Yes.
Maybe not literally, but yes, metaphorically for sure. And I think that they are seeing that there are ways that they can do it. And at least in the United States, there's little tiny glimmers of hope because we have some amazing young politicians coming forward and saying, yeah, I'm only 24 or 25, but I can do this.
Yes.
So
which is great.
Yeah. Because yeah, exactly. We don't need more middle-aged and old white people telling us what to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We need diversity. Different ways
Exactly.
of thinking, different ways to approach problems, not the same things that we've been doing, because clearly it's not working.
Exactly. And myself included, I feel like, and I'm as white as they come, but I feel like it is my job to give the skills and empower the future generations, but it's also my job to step back and be quiet. Because I am not the person that, people need to hear from on everything by any means. And that doesn't mean I have to be quiet completely. I need to still stand up for myself and for other people dealing with things I'm dealing with. But I don't need to pretend that I'm the one who knows better, because I don't. So
it's true. We're all still learning. No matter how old we are, we're still learning. So
exactly.
It's true. So it says here that you survived an abusive marriage. And are you still currently fostering the teenage daughter, or?
No. So I did survive the marriage, and the daughter, she is now about to turn 39 in a couple of weeks and has a couple of kids of her own. And she's extraordinary and doing very, very, very well. Our paths in life crossed in the early 2000s when she was a teenager, and now she's all grown up, has her own career, her life, her family, and we are still very, very, very close. We're in touch all the time, and she is amazing. And so I just feel like I was, I fell onto her path for a reason, and she onto mine, and we sort of helped each other through a period of life. And she was the best part of the marriage. Honestly, she's the best thing that came out of that.
That's nice. That's good to hear. So, when you say abusive, like, what do you mean? Like verbal, physical, mental? Like, what kind of abuse was it?
It was, I would say, verbal and emotional, mental, because what I didn't know, and to his defense, my now ex-husband didn't know, was that he was living with mental illness, quite severe, but he had not been diagnosed. He was not in treatment. He was not getting care. And he didn't even know. And I truly believe that he didn't understand what was happening with his brain. And so he wasn't really able to function, and he would become frustrated with things, and he took it out on me. And so everything that went wrong was my fault. No matter what it was always my fault. And I had caused, apologies if you hear my cat meowing in the background.
It's okay.
she's just weighing in to agree. Yes, it was bad. But so he had a lot of issues, and then we had this foster child that we were trying to figure out how do we take care of, and we had just gotten married, and there were so many things happening that it was really just an impossible scenario. And the greatest thing that he did was, years after we were actually divorced, he called me up and finally said that he had been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder.
Oh my God.
He said that it won't excuse his behavior, but he hoped that it would explain his behavior. And that was a huge kindness that he did that, because it helped me to understand that while I certainly wasn't perfect, and I'm sure I contributed to things too, but that his there was sort of a reason why he was so erratic and would have these really frightening outbursts at me or at other people, particularly when we were driving. He would stop the car on the freeway in the fast lane.
Oh my goodness. That's
really,
so
really
dangerous.
so dangerous. And it's amazing we survived a lot of the scenarios that he put us in.
Oh my goodness.
But now at least I understand that in his brain, for some reason, he didn't see that he was doing something wrong, or I don't even know. I mean, I will never totally understand what was happening for him, but it was that. There were really many, many, many frightening moments. And the lasting part, we would get through the moments, but there was this constant fear that there was going to be the next moment. And the fact that all of them were blamed on me because he didn't know how to take responsibility for things because his brain wasn't working right.
Wow. But at least you got closure, which is great, because a lot of people do not get that closure. So I'm happy that you got a closure and you got a wonderful daughter out of it.
Absolutely.
Which is wonderful.
Yeah.
So in your opinion, why do you think HIV is different for women than for men?
I think it's different for women for a couple of reasons. Just physiologically, our bodies are different. So it manifests in different ways in women, and we're not included in studies as much as men. Even today, it's better than it was, but it's still not quite as good as it should be. And so I feel like that we don't know 100% that all of the medications work the same way. And early on, there were some disastrous situations where they had only tested medications on men. And then when women would take them, they got very sick and some even died. So things like that, they're just physiological differences. There's also, of course, the whole issue of reproductive health that is very different. That for many women, when we think about what happened in the United States where they overturned the Roe v. Wade and the abortion rules.
Yes.
Early on, for women with HIV, it was just assumed that you could never have a child because you would be a murderer. And so it was sort of like, you will have an abortion if you get pregnant.
Oh my gosh.
Whereas now I don't even know, I can't even fathom what that conversation is like for a woman with HIV. I hope that it's very different than it was. But at the same time, in many, many other countries, many more other countries, women, despite having HIV, were expected to have children still, even though it might be bad for their health. And they might not have been in a place where prevention of mother-to-child transmission was available. And yet they still had to have children, which sometimes could be worse, but society was like, we don't care, you still have to have kids. But then they would have the children, the baby might have HIV. Suddenly the family realizes that HIV is now in the mix, in the baby, in the mother, and then she gets blamed for bringing HIV into the family when it might have been the father. But she would suffer the consequences inordinately. That was always out of balance in my observation. And then there were issues, and then there's issues around breastfeeding, for example. And the World Health Organization and UNICEF and the organizations that work on all things related to children always say that it is best to breastfeed exclusively for the first 6 months of the baby's life, if possible. And yet, with a woman with HIV, the advice is a little bit different. And if you can, they recommend not breastfeeding for some women, and that you should only use formula. And yet, there again, if you don't have access to the formula or the clean water to mix the formula, then you're in trouble. And then you're in society where everybody expects you have a baby. Of course, you're going to breastfeed. But if a woman's not breastfeeding, what does that mean? What's wrong with her? Why is she doing that? So it presents a whole nother set of very visible issues that men don't necessarily have to deal with. And then there's the whole issue around stigma, that if a man I mean, the bottom line is, I think society across the board sort of allows men to have sex with other people, multiple partners, and it's just men being men.
Mm-hmm.
But society assumes that if a woman has sex with somebody and contracts HIV, somehow they must be a horrible, terrible person,
Yeah.
when it may be the only partner they've ever been with who gave them
Give
HIV.
it to them. Yeah, it's true.
There's a double standard there. And so I think that women deal with the stigma, deal with a stigma that is different than what men get.
Yeah.
And that's on many, many things. I mean, that's not unique to HIV. Sadly, there are a lot of double standards in our world for women. But those are a couple of things that come to mind immediately that women really deal with differently than men when it comes to having HIV.
Yeah, that's true. Because I'm sure it's the stigma that killed my mother, not the
Yeah,
HIV or AIDS, whatever. It's the stigma of people knowing and painting her as a promiscuous lady or a
exactly.
bad lady or whatever. But
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
um, for anyone that just realize that they have HIV or somebody that's living with HIV, like what advice would you give them to continue living their life without feeling the shame that comes from it?
I think the most important thing is to find other people living with HIV.
Mm.
And that is easy for me to say sitting here in the comfort of my home. It is not so easy to do when you're the person hearing this information. But I think that pretty much everywhere in the world now, there are communities of people living with HIV, and there are networks of women living with HIV that a person can tap into. And I think that if you can find another person living with HIV who has had a shared experience, that is one of the best things, because then you realize you are not alone. And the minute you are able to talk to somebody else who truly, truly, truly knows what you're going through, it becomes a little bit less scary. And the hold it has on you of living with this thing starts to diminish even a tiny, tiny bit. And that makes a gigantic difference.
Mm.
So there is a group called the International Community of Women Living with HIV, and or ICW for short. I think they have icw.org might be their website. I'm not sure, but definitely International Community of Women Living with HIV is something a woman could look for. And there's another group called the Global Network of People Living with HIV. They're both global networks of people living with HIV who have both regional networks and country level networks and local networks of people living with HIV all over the planet. So that is a place to start.
Okay.
And it's somewhere to at least look and see what they're talking about. They have lots of information about how to deal with it. I remember early on, we created a sort of toolkit for women living with HIV to learn how to become their own advocates with their doctors, how to deal with the stigma, how to tell people, because disclosure is very difficult. The best tip I can give to somebody for disclosure is, first of all, keep in mind, once you tell somebody, you can't get the information back. But also that if you are in as good a frame of mind as possible, considering the situation, the person hearing that information will take it better. And so sort of prepare yourself to tell anybody that you're going to tell, and start with people that you feel truly are going to be supportive. And sadly, we don't know that until we've told them. We don't really know
Yes.
what their response is going to be. But that's why if there's any way to talk to somebody else living with HIV, your chances are better, because they're much, much less likely to,
Understandable.
yeah, they're going to understand. They're going to be like, yep, I've been there. I know what that feels like. And I think that's a good place to start.
Okay. Thank you so much for talking about your life and and everything, the tips that you gave. So if you're out there living with HIV, please reach out to those places that Martina just mentioned, and just know it's not a death sentence. Okay?
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Martina.
Thank you. Thank you. And if anybody wants to reach out to me, I have a website, martina-clark.com, and I am always checking my messages there. So that's another option.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Big thank you to our guest for today. And if you would like to learn more about today's topic, please go on howtosurvivesociety.com. There you can get some life skills courses and some merchandise, and contact me if you would like to be a guest on the show. So thank you so much for tuning in, and have yourself a lovely day.